So should you buy or rent a house? I get asked this question all the time, and unfortunately there's no one answer fits all. You know, the Grant Cardones out there say that you should never own your own house. I don't necessarily agree with that, but it depends on each and everybody's situation. So I'm gonna give you a few different examples of different reasons of why I believe you should buy or why I believe you should rent a house and what I've done over my lifetime and the decisions that I've made. And just to clarify, I'm not a financial advisor giving you financial advice, but I am here trying to give you free content and as much value as possible. So for that, if you could smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, it'd be greatly, greatly appreciated. And there are some huge benefits to being an owner and some not so good benefits to being an owner, some huge benefits to being a renter and some not so good benefits to being a renter. So make sure you're locked in and you pay attention. This is Austin Rutherford, where we talk business, finance, and real estate. So first things first, the first thing that I always recommend to people getting into the real estate business or wanting to grow their wealth through real estate is house hacking. You know, if you're young or if you're single or even if you're old, house hacking is a great way to start building wealth. And I'm not gonna break down the entire process of house hacking in this video because I've done it in a different video. If you wanna check that out after this video, go ahead and check out that video that we made right here. But it's basically how you can literally live for free. So super high level, very quickly, you buy a 2 to 4 family building, you live in one of the units, you rent the other units out, those other rented units cover your mortgage payment. So in essence, you're living for free and you no longer have a rent or a mortgage payment. But in this video, like I said, I wanted to give you a few different examples of different life situations that people could be in and what I would recommend, what I've done in the past in those same situations. So maybe you cannot afford a 2 to 4 family building. Depending on where you're at in the country, you know, they can cost a lot of money. Or maybe you just want some privacy. You don't want a neighbor next to you and attached to you in a duplex. And that's completely understandable. And just to point out, if you have more money than you know what to do with, then obviously these suggestions aren't going to come into play for you. These are if people are on somewhat of a budget looking to make a good financial decision to help set themselves up for the future in a better way. And if you're anything like me, I was balling on a budget when I started, so I had to be very particular on the decisions that I made and the places that I lived. So one of the examples that I'm going to give you here is if you're somebody that's always on the move, if you don't plan on living in one place for an extended period of time and you plan on just moving around maybe city to city or state to state, then buying a house and living in it is probably not the best decision for you. And the reason I say that you should probably be renting in that type of situation is because you're going to end up losing money when you sell the house. Now, there's a couple exceptions to this of why you should buy a house if you're going to be traveling and moving a lot. One is you just got a crazy discount on a deal. For whatever reason, the deal fell into your lap and you got it at 50 cents or 60 or 70 cents on the dollar. Buy it, because no matter if you move it afterwards, you're still going to be able to sell it and make a profit. The second reason is if it makes sense as a rental property without you living there. So there's a way to evaluate deals to make sure that it will still cash flow if you decide to move, and then you can start building your wealth through rental properties. But to go out there and buy a $500,000 house that rents for $2,500 a month, which the mortgage is $3,000 a month, it just doesn't make sense, because if you do move, you'll be cash flow negative, which is not a good position that you want to be in. So just to explain why I say you'll lose money, just to put it into perspective for you. So let's say you go out there and you buy a house for $200,000. Most people put 5 to 10% as a down payment on a property. So let's just use 5%, for example. So 5% of $200,000 is 10 grand, which means that the bank financed $190,000. Most times when you go to sell a house, the seller, yourself, has to pay the closing costs. So they have to pay the 6% in realtor fees, they have to pay the title fees, the transfer fees. You might have to put a little bit of money into the property. So day one, you bought the house for 200 grand. If you were to sell it day one, you owe 6% in realtor fees, it's $12,000. Another 3-ish% in other fees, it's another $6,000. And a couple other grand in repairs, that's $20,000 that you're in the hole from day one. So you can't buy it and sell it because you'll literally lose money from day one. It just doesn't make sense to do that. Now we're going to get into a different example. If you're staying there long term, you will start creating wealth and start creating equity in the deal, which we're going to break down here in a second. But if you're planning to move relatively often, within 5 years, if you don't plan on staying somewhere for at least 5 years, maybe 3 or 4 years, 5 years is a great number, then don't buy. Unless you get a crazy discount or unless it still makes sense as a rental property. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get your money back out of it. The other example is if you do plan to live in one location for the next 5-ish years, 3, 4, 5 years, then buying a house could be a tremendous decision, basically for the same reasons as the last one was not a good decision, because you would be underwater selling quickly. So if you stay there longer, you'll build equity in the house and you'll actually make money at the end of the day. The thing that a lot of people don't realize, when they get a new loan on a property for a 30-year mortgage, the first like 5 to 10 years are very, very heavily weighted towards interest. So very little of your money actually goes towards principal. So what that means is every time you make a monthly mortgage payment, the interest is very high and the mortgage is very low. And every time you make the payment, it starts to crunch and crunch and crunch and crunch. And then 10 years in, you're almost at a break even. And then 20 years in, you start paying a little bit more principal than interest. And then 25 years in, you're paying a lot more principal than interest. They do this because the bank needs to make money if people buy and sell houses all the time. So it's very interest heavy at the beginning and very principal heavy towards the end. So for that same example, you buy a house for 200 grand, you put 5% down, you get a $190,000 loan. 5 years later, after 5 years of mortgage payments, you'll still owe $175,000 on that property. So even if the property did not appreciate at all, which normally it does, it goes up 2, 3, 4, 5% a year. Property doesn't appreciate at all, you owe $175,000, you sell for $200,000, you pay the closing costs of roughly $20,000, you still end up making $5,000 and moving on to the next house. So like I said, if you plan on living there, it makes sense because you're gonna owe less monthly on a mortgage than normally you would in rent. 5 years later, you owe less, you sell the house, you make money. Now, if you live there for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years and the property appreciates, you could be sitting on a boatload of equity and you can start having real wealth just by simply owning one property. So like I said before, the only way that I think that you should buy a single family property if you plan on moving and if you plan on being somewhat of a nomad is 2 reasons. Cash flow, that's number one, fourth and foremost. It has to make sense through cash flow. You gotta be able to rent it out and make money as a rental. Like I said, the second reason is if you get a crazy deal. But what cash flow means is that without you living in the property, after you pay your principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and potentially property management expenses, the rent has to cover all of that and some, so you make profit on it at the end of the day. And if you don't know how to tell if a property is going to cash flow or not, if you check out this video, after this video, it'll show you how to break down and how to see if a property actually cash flows and if you'll make money at the end of the day. Otherwise, like I said, you will be underwater if you buy a house and move a year later with no appreciation, because you're going to owe more on the property than you'll be able to sell it for after paying those expenses. I've been there, I've done that. I've sold a house and literally had to pay somebody else to buy the property from me. It's not a good experience in any way, shape, or form, and I don't want you to be in that position. So like I said, if you have unlimited capital, everything that I'm talking about is completely irrelevant, because you're going to buy what you want to buy for the reasons that you want to buy it. It's not for an investment. It's because you want to live there and you have the money to live there. But if you're like me, when I started, I was balling on a budget. I had to be very conscious of what I wanted to do and where I spent my money. So if you're on that side of things, which I was, you got to ask yourself a serious question. What do you plan for the future? Do you plan on staying somewhere for an extended period of time? Or do you plan on moving around a while? So you got to ask yourself that question and have an answer so you don't accidentally make a bad decision financially that could put you in a bad position in the future. But just to clarify here, let's say you do buy a house and then decide to move a year or two later. It's not the end of the world, because you did put a down payment down on the property. You might not get all of that down payment back, but you're not going to lose a ton of money, and hopefully the property would have appreciated by that point, so you could make a little bit of money on the sale of the property. So personally, the first time that I moved out of my parents' house was a duplex. I bought a duplex that was discounted, I renovated it, I refinanced, I used the BRRRR strategy, and then I house hacked it. So I took the BRRRR into a house hack. So I got the property in essence for free, none of my own money, and then the monthly mortgage payment was covered by the other half of the rent and renting out 3 bedrooms in my house to some of my friends. So I was literally living for free. And then I wanted to go out there and get a nicer house. So what did I do? I bought more rental properties. So when I moved into a new house, all that income covered my mortgage payment. And then I built a new construction house and moved into that property. After that, I decided to move into an apartment. And then after the apartment, we actually decided to make a lifestyle change and actually live the life that we wanted to live and wake up in the area that we wanted to wake up. And we're actually moving to Fort Lauderdale here in the next couple weeks. I'm very, very excited about that. I haven't really shared it with anybody, so you're some of the first people to know, but I love the sun, I love the ocean. We're staying in a high-rise overlooking the beautiful ocean. You know, once we move down there, get a feel for it, then we'll end up eventually buying a property and living in a house down there, but right now we're in a high-rise condo. And I was also thinking about making a video that explained literally every house that I've ever lived in and the numbers behind it and the decisions behind why I did that. So if that's a video that would interest you, drop a comment in the comment section below and let me know if you want me to make a video like that or not. Basically take it back from like day one and show you how I've almost in essence lived for free my entire life after moving out of my parents' house. Now don't forget, the best way to get started in real estate, 100% in my opinion, is to house hack. Buy a 2 to 4 family property, live in one, rent the other ones out, and live for free. And like I said, if you want to learn more about what house hacking is, check out this video here. You won't be disappointed, I promise. As always, appreciate you being here. Make sure you smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.